Hi, Michaela.
Hello, Steve.
Well, here we are, back again in this dialogue format. The last few weeks, months even, I think, we've been having on the podcast excerpts from your live teaching events in Portugal and Australia and the USA, all over the world. We've been touring around, but now we're back in this dialogue format for a little while. So, what's up with that? Why are we doing this?
Ah, well, it's a new year. Also, the first couple of months of the new year, we're focusing on online, programs. So it's a nice time for us to actually film things because we are not traveling and the internet is stable, and we have some time to also kind of dive into the new things we're doing this year, and maybe do some podcasts on that. I'd like to do kind of AMA podcast as well. So it's nice to actually be back on Zoom for a little while. And then, of course, once we start live teaching, there'll be live Q&As again. But yeah, I'm happy about it.
Yes, and we'll be issuing a call out for any questions for Michaela for the AMA, the Ask Me Anything format. So if you, dear listener or viewer, have questions for Michaela, please write them in to us, workshops@michaelaboehm.com, or indeed look out on Instagram. We'll be in the next days sending out an invitation for questions there. Okay, so New Year's. This is the first podcast we're doing of 2024. And this is the time of New Year's. It's the time of New Year's resolutions. It's the time of reflection on the past year and so on. So my first question to you was, do you do anything in particular to look back or take stock of the year before? Often New Year's, we think always of the year to come. Do you do anything in particular to look back over the year that has just passed?
This year I did, which was really actually quite nice because I think, you were talking a little bit earlier about the pandemic years, the black hole of all kinds of things. And so, this was 2023 was the first year we were back to traveling. And as the, New Year approached, it actually occurred to me that this was the first year back, and I still had a bit of, I don't know, residual um, feelings of having been stuck at home. And so it was really nice to look at travel photos and look at the calendar and look at what we actually did last year. And the moment I did that, I was just so happy. I mean, so happy to have been able to travel, and so happy to be able to go to new places, like, the place that we're now teaching out of in Portugal was just such a great find. So I did actually, for the first time in quite a few years, go back, look at photos, reminisce about trips, make a bit of a list of what we have done, both, in the teaching schedule, but also the things I've started last year. Like, I finally started writing again, with some real joy in it. And so it was really good. And when I taught yesterday, because of course yesterday was the calling in the New Year's call, the traditional calling in the New Year's call, I was actually talking a bit about the resolution piece, right? Where resolutions essentially are more about dissolving things or letting things go. You can maybe elaborate on the Latin origin of that word in a moment, but it is all about letting things go so something new can come in. And that, I think, is a really good practice to do at the end of the year or the beginning of a new year, is to look at what needs to go, what is no longer kind of a useful belief or useful pattern or useful habit, or even, useful way of doing things. And when that's been established, then kind of going into whatever is new. So that's what I've been doing, and it felt really quite joyful and nice.
Very interesting. And I understand you've been experimenting with a journaling process also in the last 2, 3 weeks. Would you mind saying something about that?
Yeah, that was actually really quite interesting. And I think, now that we're talking about it, that definitely probably brought that whole letting go before stepping into something new on more fully for me, because I listened to my way back from Europe when I was there in December. I listened to a podcast, and it was a Huberman Lab podcast on a very specific writing protocol, and we'll link to that in the notes. And it's a writing protocol that's been reviewed and studied by over 200 studies. And the interesting thing about that writing protocol, which really piqued my interest, was that it had all these health benefits. So it wasn't just mental health benefits, which we always know that journal writing and free form writing and things like that really help mentally, but it had all these physical health benefits. And I thought it was quite interesting the way it was explained, without getting into too much detail, that it had to do with pulling the information out of an area in the brain that would keep it that would keep the information as part of having to be alert or being in fight or flight, and putting it somewhere where it was simply information. I thought that was really quite interesting in the context of nonlinear movement, of course, and somatic modalities and somatic therapies, for people to have studied that and see where it goes in the brain and what actually happens. So that said, the writing protocol is simply 4 times. So you do 4 times 15 minutes. You can do more than 15 minutes, or you can do 4 times 15 minutes, where you write about in the way it was studied, they said, write about the worst thing that has ever happened to you. And you do that for 15 minutes 4 times. And in those studies, it's shown that people who did that, you can do it on 4 consecutive days, or you can do it 4 weeks in a row or twice in a week. It doesn't really make much difference. But people who did that had drastic changes in their health levels for long periods of time, even though it was a one-time protocol. So I listened to that on the plane, and as it happened, I was on this super long flight because the Icelandic volcano had erupted that day. So they detoured us over the North Pole, and it took close to 14 hours. So I did an entire protocol of like an entire 4 sessions while I was on the plane. Because I had nothing else to do and I had a lot of time, and I really wanted to try it, and it was really, really good. Really good in the context of it clarified things, but more than the actual theme, it kind of had all these little portals into different experiences that I hadn't thought about in a while, or that connected to the event that I wasn't actually aware of, that it connected to the event. So that's what I've been doing. I've been doing this on 4 different topics by now. So I've done 4 sessions on 4 different topics. So we're done with worst thing that ever happened, and we're kind of making our way down the line in the exploration. And I found it really clarifying and interesting as an adjunct to nonlinear movement, as I do, and also therapeutic modalities and things like that. It definitely was worthwhile doing, and I can highly recommend to anyone doing it, because I could feel an immediate difference in I want to say general well-being, like general disposition, which is really quite interesting, because I wasn't expecting that.
Very interesting indeed. And did you do this writing by hand or did you type it?
I did it by hand. I'm really trying to get back to a lot of handwriting, because I've noticed that my handwriting had somewhat degraded, of course, by doing so much computer work. And that when I recently, when I started doing more handwriting, that my hand would cramp and all kinds of things. So I now make a point of doing every morning my freeform writing by hand. And I did all of this protocol by hand. I filled an entire journal, and it was really good. And it it just does something different to me because I like handwriting. So. But they say for the protocol, it makes no difference if you type it or handwrite it. And they also in these studies have detailed that it doesn't matter if you ever read it again or not, or if you toss it or keep it. So there's no benefit to keeping it or rereading it as far as the studies go.
I see. And do these 4 sessions of writing on one subject, do they have to be connected somehow? Do they form a 4-part quadrilogy, I suppose, of sorts? Or can you go over the same ground twice? Do you have to go from different angles? One of them's in verse, for example.
Well, in the instruction of the original writing protocol, right, and that we're linking to it, and it's detailed very clearly, right? The instruction is you write about the same event on 4 different occasions for 15 plus minutes each. And that's all you're supposed to do. So you go over the same ground. I think for me, I did it a bit different, but that has to do with the fact that some of the things that I consider the worst things that have ever happened to me were well trodden over, like, the house burning down in the fire and things like that. So as I wrote, other things would come out, which I found very interesting, things that I didn't even think about anymore, or that weren't even in my awareness. So I let myself get a little bit more free form on it as I got more into the writing protocol. And I've decided to kind of make it an ongoing thing where I essentially dedicate a certain amount of my writing, my morning writing, to going down the road of certain events over time and things like that, just to experiment with it. But what people describe, because a few other people I've told about it are doing it right now, and they describe that the first time you write about it, it's quite heavy, because you are trudging up essentially old stuff. And then on the second round, it gets way less heavy and way more wider picture, and then also looking back on things and stuff like that. So it does change over time. I also have to say that I never managed to just do 15 minutes. It was like, half an hour, sometimes an hour, when I had the time over the holidays to do it, where it felt really good to detail things and kind of organize them in my mind. And it was good. That's all I can say, is it was really, really good.
Yes, and speaking of morning writing, last year, 2023, saw you begin a Substack. And there's been some very interesting writing coming out of that. I know you've got some plans for 2024 as well. So I wonder if you might say something about the Substack. What was behind that? Why did you do that? I understand it's a venue for you to write somewhat more experimentally than you might in other contexts. So that's quite interesting. And how do you feel that's gone? And what are your plans for 2024 on your Substack?
Yeah, it's probably worth saying for people who don't know what Substack is. It's a platform specifically for writers. So you have a page on there that's your own publication. So it's kind of a really sexy revamp of blogging, essentially, right? If we could say that. But it's got really nice features. There's a podcast feature. They've just rolled out some video features, which I haven't used. But most people I read on Substack write weekly articles, and a lot of them are quite personal, and quite meaning quite first person. There are some people on there, very famous writers on there as well, and researchers, and there's a bit for everyone. I mean, you can do everything from news to philosophy to science to more personal writing. People who write books, write articles on there. So I quite enjoy reading it. It's really nice to go somewhere where the writing is just really good, and you can kind of follow people and get a sense of their rhythm and cadence. So I quite love it. And a lot of people use it to monetize writing directly because it's kind of a subscription-based program. I don't charge for my Substack because I want to be able to just have fun and not worry that I write something that makes people unsubscribe or things like that. So I wanted to just have something that allows me to be a bit more creative and try different things. And that's what I've been doing. And it's been really, really pleasurable and sparked all kinds of other creative pursuits. And so I took a break over the holidays, and now I'm starting back up with the weekly articles. And it's essentially meant to allow me to kind of go a little bit off the reservation, in the sense that I'm looking at archetypal and kind of mythical things connected to relationship and relationship dynamics, and more personal reflections and things I really enjoyed that I want to show other people. So there's all kinds of different stuff that's happening, and it's been really joyous and pleasant and fun.
Right. And speaking of creative outpourings, another 2023 creative outpouring from you was the 55 Flavors of the Feminine Oracle and Practice Deck. And that's turned out to be massively popular. We did a retreat on it also, and that was also really incredible. So what's that about? And how did you pull that? How do you have time for all this?
Well, the way this went was we decided to do a residential retreat, which is something I really love doing, because there's something about living together, so to speak, for these 5 days, and somebody taking care of the food, meaning a kitchen, and being able to do long practice sessions and not be really hampered by somebody else's schedule. Like sometimes, when we've taught at other retreat centers, there's a schedule. And of course, when you have your own retreat at a retreat center that's just for us, like what we are doing now in Portugal, it's really cool because I can have longer sessions, I can have shorter sessions. We can be super creative. We've been outside, we've been inside, we've been in nature. And so I really, really, for a long time now, wanted to do more work on flavors as in the embodied different facets or different expressions that all humans carry. And not only women, of course, all humans have all these different ways that we can express. But we're typically narrowed down to some personal favorites, let's say, that are natural to our expression, but also kind of societal and familial roles that we have to play. And then for many people, there's like these flavors or these expressions that they would like to play with more. And nowadays, of course, people have better outlets for that. Like, the whole festival culture is essentially about people getting dressed up in different costumes or being wild and crazy for the weekend, or, having costumes. And that comes out of that real desire to be many other things that we, of course, also are. So to me, flavors and flavor practice and considering being different things is in itself super valuable. And I think something that's been, somewhat neglected in the way we live, because it's so narrow for many people. And then, of course, also when we look at the more lineage aspect of the work that we're doing, my lineage, in the workshop offerings, there is deity yoga and the expression of something more like, let's say, exalted or refined through us and merging with that. And for that particular exploration, it's also really nice to have a capacity and a variety to express in different ways. So any which way I looked at it, I really wanted to do more work on flavors. So we scheduled a flavor retreat in Portugal, made it residential. I created this entire curriculum around it, and then I wanted props. And so, so I started looking at gathering flavors that would be useful, both flavors that people are not used to, flavors that they could relate to, stuff that's kind of almost like a medicine, some medicinal, almost homeopathic flavors that help people, have more boundaries or feel more exuberant or feel a bit happier and lighter or darker and sexier, all of those kind of things. So in the past, when we've done stuff like that, I'd go and get YouTube clips, and sometimes you'd find great things on YouTube and stuff. So I started on that, and I was like, wait, I could just figure it out, on rendering, like a voice command or written command to image rendering, and play around with it till I have what I really want to work with. And then that's what I did. So I got like heavily into writing descriptions that would translate into the kind of feeling that I wanted these flavors to have. And I spent the entire summer doing that very geekily on my computer, really honing the writing so that the writing and how would I have to write something so it would have an emotional expression of something. And then looking at the images and refining that, and then eventually photoshopping some of that, and adding and subtracting and picking. And so I did an enormous amount of renderings, and then picked 55 to use as props for the workshop. And then I figured, well, now that I have them, I might as well have them printed. And then the next thing was, well, if I'm printing them, shouldn't I just make a deck out of them? And then I wrote practice instructions. And then when I was done with the practice instructions, I figured, well, if I really want to put it out, I should probably also do an oracle description, because not everyone wants to practice. So then I sequestered myself for an entire weekend and got into kind of oracle mode and wrote 55 oracle messages. And then eventually it became a booklet and a card deck, and now it's available. I did a first printing just for the workshop, and then I did a print. Then we did like a box printing for anybody who wanted them, and then we had to do a second edition. So now I made a few changes to the booklet, and just for easy reading, and now it's available again as something that people can get and practice with, or just use it as an oracle. And I was saying yesterday, while I wrote it, of course, and while I did it, I was so into it that I couldn't do it myself. But now that a bit of time has passed, I pull an oracle card for myself every morning, and I read the description, and I had forgotten what I wrote. So it's like fresh and new for me too. And it's really fun.
Yeah, that's great. And I wasn't so familiar with this idea of oracle cards before you made this. And each of the cards comes with a sort of written description designed to, right, there it is. Yeah. Nice. And what is this idea of oracle cards? It's a whole thing. How do you use those? What's the way to work with oracle cards generally?
Well, I mean, oracle cards nowadays is a whole thing. I mean, most people have used tarot cards, right, which is a very specific set of divination, let's say. And oracle cards, of course, are a bit different in the sense that typically the oracle is written by some, tarot cards have an established meaning. You can interpret a bit, but for yourself, or different people who make tarot cards do different interpretations, but it's fairly fixed. While with an oracle, you can go anywhere, of course. And I'm working on making oracle cards out of the 12 facets, material as well. And there, of course, is traditional meanings to specific cards. For instance, in this deck, there's a few cards that are related to certain archetypes and to certain goddesses through history and things like that. I'm working on a male deck right now, which will also be quite a bit of fun, I think. With archetypes and like physical, let's say, resonance that we have through mythology or story. But there's also things that are totally out of left field that we can feel in the body as something that we can resonate with it, or that wakes up something. So the oracle part in this, so this is the practice part, the waking up, or kind of igniting or sparking expressions or curiosity about expressions. And then the oracle is essentially something to feel or think as a means of, divination in the loosest sense, meaning there's something to think about and feel that might resonate with what we're working with. And you were there when we did when people picked a card, and I wrote those. I read those descriptions for the very, very first time, and it was really uncanny how what people had worked on in the retreat actually connected with the descriptions, and that's one of these really beautiful kind of mystical or mythical aspects of allowing messages to work with our system. Just to finish the whole story around the oracle cards off, it's been very, very joyous and rewarding to try out new mediums and to use writing and my personal practice as well as my personal preferences. I love cards. I love cards as part of a morning ritual. So to be able to do something that directly relates both to my personal practice and to the things we're teaching in the context of embodiment and waking the senses and tuning in and creating proper interoception, and all of that was just really good. And why I love cards so much for a morning ritual, and this brings us a little bit more to New Year's stuff, right? And people wanting to start new things in the new year. I think being able to have a very simple time in the morning, even if it's just a few minutes, to connect and reflect is very useful. And that's why writing in the morning is good. But my favorite way to do it is to just have a cup of tea, sit. I typically try and get sunlight because that's also really good first thing in the morning. And then I pull an oracle card and I pull some tarot cards often. And I use it as a means of connecting and reflecting before the day starts. And, when people go, they want a new routine for the New Year's, or they want to establish regular practice and regular engagement. I think that's a really good one to jump into, in the sense that when you start your day with something for yourself that's not arduous or tedious or requires, getting up at the crack of dawn and, working out immediately or running up a hill with a backpack or whatever. Some people find that pleasant, but a lot of people find that a bit harsh in the morning. To start with something that's actually nourishing is really good for establishing new habits and patterns.
Very cool. And that's the 55 Flavors of the Feminine Oracle and Practice deck. And whereabouts is that available?
Well, you can find it at templeofthebodyintheworld.com, which is where all the physical products will be found, and there will be more to come this year. There's also a link on the homepage of michaelaboehm.com, but you can order it directly, and it's shipped directly from templeofthebodyintheworld.com, and we'll, of course, link to that.
Templeofthebodyintheworld.com. Okay. And so my last question to you today, New Year's resolutions, that sort of thing. I'm not going to ask you what are your New Year's resolutions particularly, but I am curious if you have any themes of resolutions. Sometimes people say, well, I want to focus on health, or I want to focus on creative things, or I want to focus on my relationships, or I want to focus on my career, and so on and so forth. What sort of categories do you consider, or have you been considering, as you've been looking ahead to 2024?
Well, I think I want to say first that, I try not to make resolutions in the sense that for me, the word resolution and that, has this feeling of I must wrestle myself into something or, do better or things like that, which I don't actually want to engage for anyone else or for myself in the sense that I think, this whole idea that in the middle of winter, when we really should be resting and, laying fallow, so to speak, in the cycle of the body, that you kind of, start these massive things. I don't want to really go down that road for myself or encourage it in anyone else. So the whole idea, and that was the idea in the call yesterday as well, which we'll also link here, the replay of that, is how can you sustainably enter with more of what you want to do and maybe let go of some of the things that you don't want to do anymore that are not really useful, which is more in the, let's say, vision and intention domain, I think, than in the resolution kind of domain. That's just me and the way I would like to look at it. And so for me personally, I think this year has a lot to do with, well, I mean, this question is definitely a hard one to answer, because on one end, I'm crazy excited about the year ahead in the sense that I have a lot of energy and a lot of attention and a lot of go get it in the realm of us being back out on the road, right? I'm just so excited about, being live with people, but also new online programs that are like really stuff I love teaching, like, the archetypal stuff, the mythical stuff. We're doing the 5 flavor families this year, which is mythical, archetypal, very specific kind of fun engagements. So I'm really, really crazy about that. I'm happy we're going back to Amsterdam. We're doing Portugal. We're doing a month in Australia, right? So it's like I'm ready and raring to go and get on the road. So that's there. And I'm not going to lie and say that I don't have a lot of, great intentions and excitement for that. But at the same time, what I would like to do, and I talked a little bit about that with the handwriting, is to kind of go back to things that I used to really enjoy that have gone by the wayside because of, spending a lot of time on a computer and on my phone and, in the digital domain. So one of the things that I've promised myself this year is to do a lot more handwriting, handcrafting, creating things. I've started lino cutting, and as a means of doing a bit of art and maybe another set of oracle cards and all of those kind of things that personally give me a lot of creative juice and joy and excitement. So that's my personal New Year's resolution, is a little bit of the back to nature, back to using my hands, using my body, writing, art. And I know that then that influences a lot teaching and, the things I enjoy creating for other people. How about you?
Yes, well, for me, I think the one thing I'm always trying to do is to seize the season in a sense. And by season, I don't necessarily mean spring, summer, autumn, winter, that sort of season, although perhaps also. But what is there to be done? What's the thing to be doing at the moment? Because very often opportunities and configurations of life circumstances, they don't necessarily last all the time. There are certain time, I think back, for example, we traveled together all over the world and we had that. And then, of course, pandemic came and we were not able to do it. But we sure made the most of it when we could do it. And then the pandemic came and we really made the most of that pandemic, it must be said. But then that also changes and that also opens up. And a new season, to use that term in a more sort of metaphorical way, opens up. So I think for me, I attempt to be sensitive to what what is the particular configuration of my life? What are the opportunities that
Mm.
it presents? And especially the sorts of opportunities that are, in a way, most notably transient, so that I make sure to be focused in the right sorts of directions for that particular period of time.
Well, that's quite interesting. And when I'm listening to you, I'm wondering, how do you determine, or how do you know what to put most of your energy towards, right? So, I was talking about being super excited about teaching and traveling, but also wanting to do something completely different that requires different kinds of energy. So how do you allot energy to those cycles and seasons?
Well, I think it's a combination of gut instinct and discipline. Those two things together, if gut instinct and discipline are able to work hand in hand, or I suppose intestine in gauntlet or whatever, then I know I'm on the right track. Gut instinct without discipline is indulgent. Discipline without instinct is dead and runs out of that ability to break into new ground or to refine or hone something in a living way. You get too far away from the fire at the heart of the forge, so to speak. So when they're together, balanced together, if I can bring them together, then that's the case. So I trust my instincts as to that question, and I make sure to apply rigorous discipline to that, and that's always guided me well so far.
Thank you.
Well, that was very interesting indeed. Thank you, Michaela, for this conversation. Do you have any last remarks you'd like to make before we wrap up this episode?
Thank you. I think this was a nice way to jump back into recorded and podcasts. So we'll send out a call for Ask Me Anything episode. I want to also go into a few realms of inquiry that people typically have, right, around relationships, around embodiment, trauma, things like that. So look forward to picking it back up.
Thank you very much, Michaela.
Thanks, Steve.